Hi, Jennifer from Porcelynne here, and today we are doing the sewing for the new Ashley Boyshort. Now, if you actually have the new version of my book or even the old version of my panty book, you can do the same techniques that I'm doing with the patterns that are in the back of the book. I believe the seam allowances on those are only 1/4 of an inch, so just do things accordingly based on what the seam allowances are and how you're going to be sewing it. So we cut out our patterns on the last video, and for this new one I'm actually going to be using my this new lingerie elastic that I have. It's really soft, it's plush, it's nice and firm. And so you can actually use this on the garment either hidden inside a seam or actually having it touch the skin. So either way goes. I haven't decided which way I'm going to do yet, so we'll see once I get over to the machine. For my daughters, we're going to do a fold over elastic. And so I have this one. I don't have any white on hand here, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to pre-fold and iron this elastic in half to make it easier to sew. So I'm going to go over to my iron. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to first start by pressing in half. Now you want to make sure that your iron is not too hot because you don't want to melt your elastic. So, doesn't seem too hot yet. And a good steam. There we go. So you can see it's kind of giving that nice fold in half. So I'm going to do this for the full length. It'll just make things a whole lot easier. Ooh, hot, hot, hot. And it doesn't hurt to have a bunch pre-folded and ironed kind of in your stash. So you're going to want to test your fold over elastic, and really any elastic that you have. Get a scrap of fabric that you kind of like do straight across the grain at a 45 degree of the grain and then straight up and down. And then sew little pieces of elastic on each of those to see how it behaves. And that way, if you get to an area that you know your fabric is going to stretch more, then you're going to need to pull your elastic a little bit. So it's kind of like you're really going to play a little tug of war to see, okay, how am I going to get this fabric to lay flat by stretching the elastic? And you just have to kind of play around with it. Some areas you need stretch more than others. In the actual crotch, right at the crotch width, you don't want to have any pulling in there. So we don't want to have it like kind of ruche at all. Around the butt, you can do that. So I can show you when we get to that point that we can actually pull the elastic a little bit in that area. So this Boyshort is actually the kids extra large. I made it for my daughter. I used a fold over elastic. So we actually will be removing some seam allowance from the pattern to make up for this. So we keep the correct width and everything. This entire thing is sewn with the home machine, or it could be a zigzag. So what I did here is I used my industrial machine, just because I don't sew with my home machine anymore because I gave that one to the kid over here. So this is all done with the zigzag and the straight stitch. So I just show how to do this entirely with a machine that you may have at home already. So for the Ashley Youth size, we are going to be making it with fold over elastic. So I've already shown you how to remove the seam allowances on the waistline in the leg, and I cut the exact measurement. And so I just wanted to kind of go over really briefly. So you want to check the stretch of your fold over elastic. See, this one is actually pretty firm and it comes back to its normal size. A lot of them are a little bit cheaper and a little bit thinner. So as you sew it, it will actually stretch out. This one does actually come back a little bit. So for my waistline, I'm not going to affect anything. I'm not actually going to change the measurement or anything on it. I'm going to keep with the measurement I cut for the waist. For the legs though, I do want it to hug the leg a little bit more. So what I'm going to do is, instead of that 18, I'm actually just going to come in here and chop off about a 1/2 inch. If you have a much stretchier one, then you want to chop off probably about 1 inch. So I'm just chopping those off to make it a little bit easier. And then what we're going to do is this entire, the youth size I'm going to sew entirely with the straight and zigzag stitch. So that way you can see that you don't actually have to have an overlock to construct this. You're just going to take it a little bit carefully. So we've already ironed our fold over elastic in the last video. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to put them so the right sides are together. And I am going to sew this at 1/2 inch. So I've removed my zigzag off the machine. And the side of my foot is 3/8. So I'm going to set this just right past it by about 1/8 of an inch. And then I'm going to start with my needle down, and I'm just going to sew back and forth and closing it, back stitch on both ends. And what I'm also going to do is I'm actually going to clip my fold over elastic kind of in like this a little bit, so when I actually open it and fold it over, we're not going to have a lot sticking out. Now there will be a little bit of the raw edge sticking out, but I'm not too concerned by that. Okay, so that is the waist. Now I need for the legs to do the same thing. So holding the pieces together, the right sides together. And I'm going to slide under my foot. So I kind of like to start it so it's actually, I'm not off the edge, I'm actually on the fabric. And actually I can see right now that they are not lined up because they are. And my daughter's right here making faces at me. She wants to be involved. So I'm starting in just a little bit, sew a little bit, and then my back stitch. Okay, so. And if I just leave it as is, it's probably fine also. You can just see that you'll end up having those little pieces kind of stick out. So that's why I like to just kind of clip the edges in. Okay, so that's a leg. Keep the leg separately from the waist. Okay, honey, you're crowding me now? And then I'm going to do it for the last piece. There's no reason to whimper. I know you want to be in the video. You can be in the intro video we do showing the finish of this. And so you can do this. I'm actually going to, the other Ashley that I'm making for myself, I'm going to do a little bit differently. You can certainly do the same thing. You basically put your right sides of the elastic together and you sew it in a loop. That's why I have those measurements for you. Okay, so those are the legs. So what I'm going to do here is, now you want to make sure that the right sides are together. Clear all this off the table.
Which step are we on?
We are now going to be on step 1. So I like to do my elastics first. So I'm also going to just kind of start, just get my pin there. Just keep a couple pins just to make sure that they're lining up right on the edges. Then I'm going to get my zigzag stitch. And so here I'm going to kind of see it moving a little bit. I'm going to do this, not a super wide one, kind of the middle of the size. I'm also going to make the stitch a little bit smaller. So what I want to do is I want to find kind of the far edge of where that zigzag is going to be. And the seam allowance here is at 3/8 of an inch. So if you wanted to, and I discussed this earlier, so 3/8 of an inch would actually be, and Emily, can you go grab me a Sharpie? So what I want to do is I'm actually going to mark on the foot, and this will end up rubbing out. So you see where the needle is right there on here on the ruler. So I'm actually want to line up on my foot. I said that'll all rub off. See, like, it'll come off. I got it, honey. And then what I want to do is, because we are doing the zigzag, we want to have it a slightly smaller stitch so it doesn't start to like really pull apart at the seams. So I've almost got it on the smallest it'll go. So I'm just starting here. So I want to make sure that the left side of it is actually at that 3/8. And hopefully this won't cause me too many problems. Okay, I'm going to go and back stitch to the end. Do a whole lot. And I'm just going to give my thread a tug as we keep going. And it looks like it's not going to be that agreeable, but there we go. You can see I'm just pulling my thread. It will help pull it through the machine. And you can see, well, we'll get a little bit more. And actually, it's a little bit tight, so I'm going to loosen the pressure on the foot. Yes, I do have to do the other side.
Because I'm looking at this.
Yeah. And actually, I don't really need to do a back stitch because it's a whole bunch of tiny stitches, so I didn't really need to make that big mess at the beginning. So that way we can kind of take a little peek when you open it up. It actually looks more like a regular stitch. And I'm sewing with the black thread so you can actually see what it's supposed to look like. So then we're going to do that on the other side as well. So no back stitch on this side because it wasn't really necessary. But I just want to make sure my...
Wasted a little bit.
Yeah, it's okay. It basically just would cause a little knot. So we want to make sure we don't really cause that much of a knot. Make sure my edges are, and my edges are not wanting to line up here, so I'm just grab another pin. They kind of grip each other, so they shouldn't move a whole lot. So, I'm good on the other camera. So I'm on step 1 where the right sides are together, and I'm just sewing the inseam, the crotch curves, so the front and the back. Okay, and we're gonna get back to some. What do you mean that's yours?
I'm reading.
Yes. Huh? Okay. Oop, and I just came unthreaded because I didn't have a long enough tail. Someone was joking with me that, you know, I need glasses for pretty much everything, but I can sew a needle, or I can mostly thread a needle with my eyes closed, even though I cannot see this needle right now. Let's see, can we get that in there?
I can.
I don't want to going. Yeah, there it is.
Can I?
Pull that out. Should have my glasses on, but I don't.
I could get through that if you
Well, I don't need them, honey. And I'm not too worried about the end of it. I want to make sure it goes through the machine. That's going to be covered with the elastic anyway. So.
Is this mine or yours?
This one's yours. My bottom's not that small. Your bottom's smaller. And so, you know, so your fabric doesn't get eaten by the machine. You know, you can pull that thread. That's why it's important to have it. And if you're asking, would it be a lot easier to do with the overlock? Oh, yeah. Definitely. But you don't need to have an overlock machine to sew knits. If you have a home machine that has like the lightning stitch, that would actually be a good option as well. And if you have an older home machine, you can do what is the S stitch. Well, an S stitch is basically like a lightning stitch. Oops, it basically stitches full stitch forward, half stitch back, full stitch forward. Can you find the pin I just dropped? Okay, there we go.
I do not want to step on it.
Okay, so we have those together. So coming back over to the instructions, when I say open it flat, so we're going to open it like this, and then we're going to line up the crotch seams. Now, we can do the waistline first if you want. It doesn't really make any difference. It's not going to make it easier or harder once this is attached down here. So I'm just going to line this up. And as long as you sewed at the correct seam allowances, everything should line up. That's fine, honey. If we can't find it, you can't find it.
But then you can't snip anywhere.
Huh? Use words that I can understand.
Okay.
Mumbling is not attractive. Okay, and so I'm going to do the same thing. My seam allowance is still that 3/8. In this area, it actually wouldn't really stretch a whole lot. I mean, there is some stretch in the fabric, so. So I'm going to go straight across. You actually don't really want this to stretch, so you could actually even sew a little piece of something stable, so like a little piece of selvage or something in here. And that just kind of went all over the place. That's fine. I can always fix that. Come back in there. and it's, of course, the needle's not threaded. And this is all going to be hidden with the lining, so we don't have to worry about that. Come on. So where is that fancy tool I have? There we go.
Can I see?
I'm going to try and get this. It's this tool. The little tool that I showed in my video last year, and it's not wanting to. That's okay. You know, it is what it is. We'll,
Did it work?
huh? Well, I needed the fabric not to stretch, and it stretched. Okay. So you've got everything lined up. So you can tell which is the front and which is the back because the crotch seam actually comes towards the front on here. So we're going to take the waistline, and where your seam is, we're going to cover this over. Now, I know a lot of people, because they say they have a hard time controlling this, that they'll actually do a single straight stitch pass and then come back and do another one. But that also, actually do the other way. So if you look, one side is actually a little bit shorter than the other. And so the side that, where are we? It's in the back. The side that you're going to be sewing on, we want to have the shorter side facing where we're sewing. So I'm going to stitch that, pin that one right there. And then I'm going to find the exact opposite of that, stick a pin over here. So we can then put it right on that other seam. Make sure it's right. So kind of really push it up into that fold. And it's okay if the fabric folds a little bit more. It's not really a big deal. And then we know that from here to there, well, we can find the halfway points if you want to. Or you can just do it as you're going, or just kind of eyeball it. So I'm going to say, okay, right here. So kind of finding the center. Right here, I'm going to take and put that in that middle bit. And then finding, are you able to see it on the screen? Huh. It's kind of hard. Is it out of focus?
Yeah, that's in focus.
Okay. So I'm just trying to find the center bit. There. Okay. So I'm going to end up sewing this whole thing on with a zigzag, but I don't want to do it as small of a zigzag, and I actually want to do it slightly wider. So I'm going to come back and make it just a little bit wider. And then I'm going to start stitching in the center back. So that's where that seam was. Where it is, it's right there. Okay. And so I like to start sewing just a little bit before you get that center back, because you don't want to really, it came out, came out again. Usually doesn't pull back, but I guess I'm not clipping it. I'm not pulling it back far enough. So I don't like to start right where the bulk is, because it can end up getting caught in the machine. So I like to start kind of shortly before it. Let's do that there. There we go. Okay. And then I like to get it lined up just a little bit. And this is where I can use a pin, or I can use my new tool. I'll have to see how this goes. I might want to use that end. And no back stitch on here. And then you just kind of make sure that you can fold that. Okay, and then once you get it started, you can find that next pin point, and then stretch your elastic. See, and there is a little bit of give on here. And then at this point, you just want to make sure it goes through the machine. You can keep it pulled, so it's stretching it slightly. Once once you get near where the pin is, we're gonna wanna take that pin out, find the next pin, shove your fabric in, and then I use my fingers just to kind of hold it in place. This is why I like the wider fold over. And I'm doing the fold over for my daughters because she always complains that the elastic is itchy. So if you have a kid that is picky, you understand. I'm getting up to the seam, so I'll take the pin out. Come find the next pin. Now if you're working on the larger size, you probably want to pin a little bit more frequently, so that way your pin is on the table from the previous pin. And then make sure that that's in there, that looks nice. I'm just kind of keeping that stretch, making sure that's in there. And you can't quite see my stitches because I did a nice full thing in there. And look, the waistline looks really good. And then, so now we need to work on the inner crotch area. And we actually need to get the lining. Where is the lining? I know I cut one. Right here. Okay, so here is my lining piece. Now in my instructions I have that you can basically kind of finish the edges either by kind of folding and stitching, or just kind of running the overlock over the edge, just using the serger to go right on the edge. A lot of the times I hardly even finish this, especially for my own use, because this doesn't fray. You know, if you're working with something, if you pull on it and it starts fraying, you definitely want to finish it. But if you're not going to be, you know, if you're not making this for commercial use, you're making this for yourself, you really don't need to finish that. If you do, and you only have the straight stitch, let's get the zigzag stitch off. And here, I don't want to do a real big stitch on it. I just want to kind of fold the edges down a little bit and just kind of straight stitch it across. And let me make sure my thread is long enough so I don't have to redo that. And so if you're wondering, if you want to make a note which is the front and the back has a slight curve to it. So if you want to just kind of shove a pin so you know which side is the back. And actually a trick to get this started is, let me grab another piece of fabric. So if you want to kind of get something started, because sometimes with the knit right on the edge, it's just hard to kind of get it going. So I'm just going to stitch straight across it, bigger stitch. And then you can always, right at the end, if you know you're going to be clipping off that corner anyways, and then it didn't get all bunched up at the very end. Clip that off, and that's going to be within the seam anyways, so I can do that again. It's good to always have just a little piece of scrap laying around. So that way you kind of have like a cleaner finish. Okay. So now I'm coming back here to the crotch area. Remember the side that's shorter, that's the front. I don't want to clip anything that's sitting down in here so you won't get to it again. And if you end up having like a little nub there, just cut that too. So we have our notches. Remember we had, I cut mine off when I cut the trim off. So I'm just gonna pin that, kind of line up that notch to where that seam is. And you can see this okay, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And I'm gonna get my pins. I'm gonna throw a pin at each one of the corners where the lining is. Just kind of walk the edges together. It sticks to my finger. I pull it right off. Problem with this real silky fabric is that it's silky fabric. Right there. Now you can baste this in, or if you're really good at just pinning, you can just pin it in. What did that happen to the other pin? I had a pin right there. Guess it fell out. Okay, chop that little piece off. Looks like there's that little nub also. Clip that. Okay. That's cleaned up. So come back to the elastic that you have pre-stitched. So that fold goes now right at that center crotch seam. So you want to kind of get that folded. I said a basting stitch to hold the lining in place would be very, very helpful. I don't want to do it just because I don't want to do it. Okay. So I am going to, I don't like to do any stretching right around the crotch area because that should just be very, very uncomfortable. So I'm just going to pin that in place. Got that leg. Then we're going to try and find the center over here. And the center right there. And squeeze it in there. Looks like I'm pinning on the inside this time. And so that's enough that I can actually work around in the machine. So let me get back on my zigzag. Get my thread. And then we're going to start again make sure that there's nothing underneath it. If you need to flip it so it's on top. I want to sew. It's a pain spot. So I'm going to start right before that center seam and then start sewing away and get past right about to where this pin is, and then I'm going to kind of readjust and find where everything should be sitting. So kind of stretching my lace or my elastic, finding where that edge is. So I got that middle bit. And I just shove everything in there. Where my finger went. And then take and pull my elastic again. Shove everything inside that fold. Let's see about this. A little bit bigger. I probably should have found the center of it, but I'm still finding the middle. Trying to get that, grab that with my fingers. And I'm keeping that held here because I should have probably had a pin right here. Whenever you stop, you really should have the needle down. Otherwise, it can just come out on you, and I probably shouldn't have just taken that pin out. If you can see if I'm in frame. Barely. Okay. I need to have that pin in there because that was holding that edge of that lining together. Once I get a little bit more, I can come in and fix that. Closer. I'm going to now grab this point and that point, get my elastic, and as you can see, I'm stretching my elastic so it meets the fabric. So let's take a look at that leg. It looks pretty good so far. So it gathered a little bit. It actually didn't gather as much as I thought it would. And it looks like I kind of screwed up right around here at that crotch seam. So I would have been much better basting it. I'll baste the other side. And then I'll go ahead and fix that piece for my daughter. Okay, so basting stitch. No zigzag. Sometimes the shortcuts don't work. Okay. See how easy that was? Okay, so then we're going to then fold over that other crotch seam, find the middle on that leg, and because this really don't use a whole lot of fabric, it doesn't hurt to, you know, kind of test it. Oops, looks like I've got more. This isn't the actual center. There we go. It doesn't hurt to test it, try it on, and see if you need to pull the elastic more. Now, every time you change the type of elastic and the stretch, you're gonna probably have to test it. So I'm gonna find the middle here, right there. And you're better off having very little of the pulling and stretching in the front, on the front side, than on the back. Because on the back, we want it to kind of hug the butt area. Hold those butt cheeks in. So I've got it kind of pinned where I need it to get pinned. And then I'm going to get my zigzag. And come back and start about an inch before that crotch seam. Remember, we don't really want it to do any kind of pulling right around, kind of in that lining area. So then you can start doing your pulling after here. And actually, I'm just gonna go to my next pin, find that center bit, fold it. I'm done. Okay, I'll clip my threads. Then I'll have Emily try it on and we'll find out if we need to make the elastics a little bit less. I'm also going to wash this before she wears it because it'll also soften up the elastic a little bit. But there we go. There is the Ashley Boyshort, and I will go in and fix this, although she probably doesn't care. It's hidden. It'll keep everything together. There you go. There's the Youth Ashley Boyshort.